You should be able to see what you can see on their webpage, right?
Not here yet. Yeah, because he would pull them forward.
Call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for May 5th, 2021. Roll call.
Budke? Johnson? Kuhn?
Here.
Lunsky?
Here.
Matichek?
Here.
Reichert? Sandy? Wasvik?
Here.
Quorum.
We have a quorum.
Quorum present. Reading and approval of the minutes from the April 7th, 2021 meeting. Any comments, questions, additions, deletions, motions? Mr. Budke?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Budke, second by Mr. Lunsky. Any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing no hands, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, meetings are approved as submitted. Mr. Brooks, I think you had an item for us.
3 dash.
Nope. So, yeah, the one item we are going to ask to be, to suspend the agenda to add item 3.4 tonight. This will be on, I think I emailed you all out, but it's on that sale of property from City Grand Forks to the airport. So if we can get you to amend the agenda to add that item to approve that transfer.
Okay, do we need a motion on that, I suppose?
Yeah, we'll need a motion and
Second.
motion and second to suspend the agenda to add it, and then we'll talk on it when it gets to 3.4.
I'll move. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Kuhn, seconded by Mr. Lunsky. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Amended or suspended agenda,
And add it, thank you.
something.
Thank you.
Okay, 3-1.
3-1, public hearing, ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the Land Development Code, signs as related to murals.
Very good. Thank you, members of the commission. Not much to add from last time we were here. This is the second reading. Only quick things I would add is that after city council and at city council, we made the quick recommendation to switch a word out in later on in the language, basically replacing the word may with must present a ghost sign application to the Historic Preservation Commission for an opportunity to provide comment. I think realistically that's just putting into practice what would have happened anyway. So just a quick clarification there, and then just that we did present the proposed changes to the DDRB and received largely favorable feedback there as well. So
What was that? Proposed change?
we presented the proposed changes to DDRB and received largely positive feedback there. So other than that, no changes to the code other than that one word, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? We do have a public hearing on this. Mr. Matichek, please.
Yeah, just for information purposes, who's the zoning administrator?
Mr. Brooks?
Currently, we'd work with our inspections department on that.
Okay.
So we're still working through that. We wanted that position listed as opposed to an office listed, because that may well come to be our planning department will be handling those issues potentially.
Because on your last page here, it says if you require approval from the zoning administrator,
That's-
for installation or restoration.
That's correct. I think previously there might have been some verbiage about inspections department,
But I
but
just want to be clear, if somebody comes in now, they have to meet with you and the inspection department?
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, the one change that is proposed in there in terms of that relates to personnel replaces the inspections department with community development. It's just basically to, again, reflect reality. We receive the applications and work with people on the front end. The zoning administrator, being the staff person that oversees this section of code, would be in final staff sign off. Which, yeah, right now, like Ryan was saying, lies within the inspections department.
We're still working through personnel on who that final person will be.
Okay.
Yep. But
Job's
this,
open, Frank.
that can
Job's
change
open.
without actually listing a department, so.
I'm not looking for the job, I just like to know who it is. Because if somebody asks you, you say, well, zoning administrator, well, who's that? And I'm supposed to know I'm planning and zoning, and I don't know who the zoning.
I just say Ryan.
You send them my way, I'll get them to the right folks.
Just before I open the public hearing, one thing that came to mind, I mentioned to Ryan, I know there was some discussion on the advertisements on the murals. I still think that's a bad idea, poor choice. I don't know if that didn't get in a motion or got dropped, because I know there's some commission members who did voice their opinions on that. So I just wanted to know if that got dropped, said, whatever.
I think Alex had mentioned at DDRB, but I think there was 100%, I think it was unanimously consensus, I think, that we got from DDRB. Alex was the one that did bring it up at DDRB that I recall, because I was listening in on that meeting.
I'd still like to, myself, I'd still like to see that go away. I just don't think it's necessary. That's me. I advertise all the time and don't necessarily need your name on something to give money to it. And then it's stuck there for a long, long, long time. With that, I guess I'll open the public hearing. And anybody in the audience like to step up and address 3-1, do so at this time. I don't see anybody. That brings it back to the commission. Mr. Budke.
Yeah, so regarding the advertising versus the artist and sponsor credit, I mean, there's a distinction being made here between advertising and like artist or sponsor attribution.
Correct.
As part of the staff review, it's being evaluated for like what you'd call advertising content, I believe.
Correct.
And then this, as it's written, it allows for what could be a business, right? Like the recent mural had a business logo, but it was limited in size and it was has a prescribed location. I understand, but at the same time, I feel like allowing that in the letter here, that opens up some more possibilities for say like funding. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to happen, right? It's not like a requirement. It's just like an allowance for.
I'd rather see it, respectfully, I'd rather see it not in there at all. Just what I think, because I say, so many things can happen. The business can go under, they can have a bad press, there's a lot of different things that, the artist name and all that, absolutely, if that's what they want to do, I applaud that. I just worry if we start going down the road, now we're gonna get into a signs and not, you guys got me to buy off on this mural thing a year ago, but now we're gonna get into signs and advertisement instead of murals, what our original intent was, and I just think that it's gonna cross over a little bit. That's my only fear, Mr. Budke, and it's just like anything else, you give them an inch and then they take a mile and it's gonna stage more and more. So that's, I just wanted to bring up that, and I know, I believe Mr. Reichert had brought that up also, and I don't see him here, so I wanted to echo that too.
Okay. Could I add just a couple of things?
Please, this all yours.
So like the staff report also mentions like a plaque as an option.
Correct.
I mean, that would be great. It also is probably like the most expensive way to like do an attribution like that, as opposed to like paint, which is already happening. So, I mean, again, this is like allowing for, so we're talking about, you could do artist or sponsor credit painted. Mm-hmm. You could come to an agreement about like a plaque or something, permanent like that. Or you could come to nothing at all, right? I mean, that maybe the building owner says like, hey, I'm thrilled that you want to do this, but no artist attribution or anything like that. I mean, that seems perfectly plausible to me. So,
I just I think sort of what we were trying to address, actually, it wasn't specifically spelled out how credits could be applied in the previous version or the previous draft, I guess you'd say, of the code. So really what we're trying to do is specify, it's sort of an inherently subjective or like opinion-based thing as to what, given person thinks is the best way to credit a mural. So what we kind of tried to do is allow that creative license to a certain degree and allow an artist to determine the best way that they'd like to include those credits in. That very well could be a plaque. I mean, that's certainly a great way to do it, but if that's not the best way that they would like to incorporate that, we also want to give the, the flexibility to incorporate that maybe a different way. While at the same time, we do want to make sure that the mural, to your point, is the focus. We want that to be what the focus of the, the given site is. So we're trying to strike that balance, I guess, with the code as proposed, basically, of allowing that creativity to a certain degree, while also having some sort of baseline rules, the 4 square feet or 1%, and the location components to specify it and make sure that the result is the mural is the focus.
Maybe one thing to clarify then. So regarding the staff review, you apply, you have to have a proposal, right, which includes like images or sketches. That I expect would include the proposed artist attribution or sponsor credit?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So that would be, if approved as written, that would be required as part of the visual. We require a visual rendering or representation. And as part of that, we would ask for, measurements and location, all that stuff for the credits as well, so.
I think that's our safety net, Steve, is this is the area we could work in, but it still has to be approved, right? So hopefully we can stop it before it gets out of control.
I just, when I saw a logo, to me, the art was the art, the name of the artist is great. You want to incorporate things from whatever, that's fine, but when you actually start seeing logos, you go, okay, now what are we doing? That was my...
I guess as long as, the size and proportions and all that's maintained and not, taken out of...
I guess you guys had me and talked me into this a couple years ago, and now you're...
I don't have a problem with it, so I guess
You're throwing me out.
I'm all for it.
No, I closed it, brought it back to us.
Okay, then I'll move to approve as proposed here.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? Anyone? Megan, I can see you now, so any further discussion, anybody? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hope you guys get what you want. I'll be taking pictures and sending them to you. Item 3.2.
3-2, public hearing, conditional use permit for a large animal vet clinic located at 5030 Gateway Drive.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So the last 2 months, we've kind of been going through the process of, we had a request for large animal vet to be included within the B3 through a conditional use permit. Now we actually have the request for, from the applicant who actually started us on this path for the conditional use. And tonight there is the public hearing. I'm gonna hop on, get our GIS located, and then I'll share it out with everybody. So the All Pets is located on Gateway Drive here. It's just west of the interstate. And it's on the north side. They're located in this building here, 5030 Gateway Drive. They're expanding into the northern side of the building. I think there was a previous tenant there that they've kind of expanded into. One of the things that we talked about looking for is making sure that people could come in with trailers, maneuver around. This was an area, obviously, where a lot of tractor trailers were already doing that. And so this is all paved out here already. It really makes it easy for somebody to get in and out. So this is probably the one area where, in terms of when we think about conditional use, we have talked about no overnights in terms of other than emergency. I think we've put in the conditional use permit that's sampled in there. We looked at what the neighbors would be, how that would mix. Well, I don't know if they're going to notice that much of a difference already. Currently, the vet that does the large animals, he does a lot of, he's making house calls. That's very inefficient from his perspective, but also then for people in the region that want to utilize that vet, they're having to pay for 2 hours of windshield time for that vet. And in this case, not all of them are going to be emergency where they can come in and maybe bring their horse in and have it go through and get something done, work done. It's probably going to be a little less expensive for them. So I think it's really part of the city being this regional hub for the area and providing these services through the folks that, in this case, the All Pets Hospital being convenient for them, so, and their customers. So with that, we're recommending approval. We think it fits with the area. Not too sure how many we'll have at these in the futures, but we're always going to look at how it fits with that neighborhood. So the applicant is here. It is public hearing. We did notify. We didn't hear anything in our office, but this is a public meeting. So with that, I'll stop rambling.
Okay, anything before I open the public hearing? Not seeing anything. Yes, Mr.
Was there a notice sent out to all the people in that area?
Correct, 400 feet around. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing. Anybody who'd like to address item 3.2, please do so at this time. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Comments, questions, motions?
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Sandy, I believe. Second by Mr. Matichak. Any further discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. 3.2 is done. 3.3.
Item 3-3, public hearing, fast track, plat of University Place, third re-subdivision located at 419, 421, 425, and 505 Princeton Street.
Good evening. I'm just getting it up right now. All right. So we're over in the university area, so along Princeton. I also have it highlighted in an image in the staff report. So 419, 421, and 425, and 505 is what we're looking at along Princeton. Really, this is just a simple moving some property lines and just getting it ready for redevelopment for that area. And I would open to answer any questions you might have, and staff recommends approval.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Halford before we open the public hearing? Seeing none? Anybody in the audience like to step up and address item 3.3, do so at this time? Seeing no one, close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Let's look at both. Moved by Mr. Budke, seconded by Mr. Kuhn. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So this is the added item that we had. I'll quickly pull up. Stop sharing.
Excuse me, is this item 4-1?
No, this is the added item, Jane, the 3.4.
Oh, you're putting that, okay, I'm sorry.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about the airport area here, and I'll pull up the, that may be okay. I'll share this out for you, Megan, so you can see it as well. We're along the east side of the airport. Up here, there's going to be an expansion of the railroad, the airport out in this area here. So it's going to be expansion of the airport property. Right now, the city owns this, so we picked that up a long time ago. It's not part of the lagoons, but it's in that area, and the city picked up all that area that was around there. There's about 32.64 acres that are being transferred. City council's approved that. It's going to go from the city to the airport. One of the rules in code, and hopefully you had a chance to look through that staff report, but one of the, we don't have to do platting, but we do need approval of planning commission to transfer to government entities. So in this case, this fits. Airport wasn't specifically listed, but clearly is a government entity, and it actually just misses In our case, we used to be anything 20 acres and above that was left could be transferred without platting. We changed that to 40 acres when we increased the size of our density out in the A1, A2. But in this case, they're just below that 40 acre requirement, and we're recommending approval. There's no need to do the platting in this case, and this approval basically is consent that it meets those requirements. So with that, we're recommending approval.
And do we need a public hearing on this?
No, there's no
Okay,
public hearing
Put it
requirement.
on that, okay? Anybody got any more questions for Mr. Brooks on this? Make a motion, or Mr. Kuhn? Second by Mr. Budke, moved by Mr. Kuhn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Item 4.1.
Four one, ordinance to amend the zoning map, rezone to B3 General Business District, lots 2 and 4, Block 7, Villiards Edition, located at 812 and 820 South 14th Street.
All right. Hello again. So we're just off of Washington. Washington's over here. And we're looking at properties 812 and 820, so behind the AutoZone right here. They're just looking at to rezone their property so they can do a little bit more updating, so it fits their needs. And mainly they're going to use it for storing their vehicles, so they're going to tear down probably the second building right here and rebuild it. So we feel like it fits into the neighborhood for rezoning. We don't see it being used for residential, so it being rezoned to B3 I think fits, and staff's recommending approval. I can answer any questions, of course.
Any questions for Mr. Halford? While we seeing none? Mr. Budke, please.
Yeah, sorry, so
Yep.
you mentioned that at 812,
Yep.
that building, it'll be torn down most likely. What is it now? Is it like a garage or a shop?
So if you look in your staff report, I included an image. It's basically a garage shop that's in pretty rough shape.
Right, okay. I'll move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Budke,
Second.
second by Mr. Lunsky. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. 4.2.
4-2, ordinance to amend Chapter 8 Land Development Code to include downtown design standards, amending Section 18-0217, B4 Central Business District, Section 18-0311, Downtown Design Review Board, Section 18-0301, signs subsection 8, signage in B-4 district, Section 18-0312, use of public right-of-way in the B-4 district, outdoor seating and parklets.
Ms. Edwardson.
Yes, thank you, Jane. I appreciate that.
Nice work, Jane.
It's, in summary, it's the update of the downtown design standards, essentially the update to the B4 code. All of those other sections Jaden just went through all tie in or have different offshoots, so we need to update them in one whole package. So to start off tonight, I do want to say thank you both to the commission and the DDRB. You've heard a lot about our staff talking about this, telling you often that it's coming and to wait for it. And so thank you for your patience as we work through particularly some different staffing things that have come up in our department as well as the city attorney's office. This project has got picked up and kind of put down as it doesn't have a hard and fast timeline. So as priorities came up for our office, we've had to shift things. So thank you for bearing with us through it. Thank the DRB, who was my steering committee throughout this, and also Charlie Cow with RDG, who was flexible as the consultant on this to roll with the punches when we had to adjust some timelines. So to start off there, I wanted to thank that. Jumping into the thick of things, why are we doing it? DDRB, the Downtown Design Review Board, and Downtown Design Standards were a post-flood implementation thing to guide the recovery after that event. Guided a lot of wanting to maintain the historic character of downtown wanted to include some revitalization efforts, so the guidelines guided those different aspects. Now today, 20 years later, the guidelines have become a very subjective thing, which has led to some unclear expectations for people coming forward and trying to figure out what they can and can't do in terms of development downtown. The current guidelines also have a lengthy approval process. Anything that requires an exterior facade building permit requires DDRB approval. So that includes your standard roof maintenance, windows and door replacements, sign replacements, things that become common nature for most businesses to walk up to our inspections department and get a permit. They're halted and have to get a DDRB meeting and approval scheduled. So it's caused some delays. The board has requested us to address this for many years. It's a big enough project that staff wasn't ever able to handle it in-house. So with the downtown action plan, the focus and looking at all the different things that they did with downtown really highlighted the need to address these design guidelines. So with that momentum, we picked up some traction, got a consultant on board, and are addressing it today. So with that, we contracted with RDG Planning and Design, who is also the Downtown Action Plan consultant, looking to create objective standards so people understand the expectations, streamline the review process. This will ultimately result in those standard building maintenance things going to a staff approval. Hopefully we get them in the door for building permits, out the door the same, within a short amount of time, hopefully within that hour. So we keep business going and that sort of thing. DDRB will continue to review large projects, new construction, but really the benefit here is those maintenance things become easier to permit and get out the door. DDRB was involved through the whole process as the steering committee. We also sought, up before this, we had a neighborhood input session. It's a very large code change for us. We had an input session last fall just to get input prior to even coming to you of how do business and property owners and developers feel about this draft. Are we close on the mark before we even bring it forward to a political body? We didn't get a huge turnout, which probably tells me that there wasn't too much concern. But we will also be notifying those same people prior to final approval. They'll get another swing at an input session. And then also want to thank the DDA and particularly the Urban Design Committee. Blue and his folks were wonderful in giving feedback and constructive guidance throughout this. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Charlie Cowell, who's our consultant and who's going to walk you through some of the different things that are changing with the code. So Charlie, I'm going to stop sharing and let you share to be able to walk through that.
Great, thank you, Andrea, and thank you, commission members, for the time this evening. Andrea kind of previewed a lot of the presentation, or at least slides I'm going to go through here today, but just wanted to take a few minutes here to go over some of the more different changes that were included in these standards drafts from the design guidelines that are currently being followed by the DDRB. So I will share my screen here. Hopefully I get the right one up. And I have a title slide here. Hopefully there we go. Okay. So today I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail on the points that Andrea mentioned, looking at the current review procedures, what is the impetus for the updates, so what is different between the guidelines and the standards as you see them today, and then just discuss any questions or comments. As Andrea mentioned, this is really a spur off the Downtown Action Plan and one of the recommendations of the development strategies compendium in that plan. Currently today, this is kind of the very general review process for items in the downtown district, starting with staff, going to DDRB for everything pretty much, and then goes to P&Z or City Council on appeals from decisions. The current review procedures today also are guided by the downtown design guidelines, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And this covers all properties in the downtown historic district area and all the items listed here. So one of the goals with this kind of effort was to take, obviously a lot of work went into those design guidelines. So really it was taking everything that was in there, looking at each item and saying, does this need to be a standard? Should this be a standard? Should this be something we keep forward as a standard and a requirement, or does this need to be tweaked, amended, or just deleted altogether because it's not working for whatever reason? So again, the impetus for updates reflecting the vision of the downtown action plan, being more objective versus subjective. As you look through the downtown design standard or guidelines, you don't see a lot of numbers. You see a lot of words like encourage, words like could, may, and so it was obviously difficult for DBRB at times to make objective decisions because there just wasn't objective standards. And then also ensuring that existing buildings retain their historic qualities if they are indeed contributing to the historic district, and then streamline the approval process where we can. So as Andrea mentioned, this is a shift of what is mentioned in the guidelines today to include the entire B4 area. So here's kind of a quick summary of what is different under these standards as they're written. Staff does review and approve all items, and because of this, this means minor items would not go to the DDRB as described in the standards. So this really speeds up the approval process for items that are relatively small that don't have large impacts. Staff always has the opportunity to refer an item to DDRB if they feel necessary, so that option is not taken away under these. There's still an opportunity for anything to go to DDRB if staff determines it might be a larger impact or something that just requires additional review. You can see here the bullet points for what DDRB automatically would get come to them. Things like development or demolition, redevelopment, new development, additions, accessory buildings, any relocations or modifications of parking lots or things on sites that would be significant, and changes in materials that are significant as well. And then obviously the guidelines, most of the guidelines now turned into objective standards. So there's a few specific things, as I mentioned, when we went item by item in the guidelines, that either we got direction from staff based on past situations, or we got direction after discussing with the DDRB of some guidelines that we needed to change, tweak a little bit, or apply more specific standards. So here, for example, are some regarding signage. For example, being more explicit on window signage and the size of projecting signs. You can see here, and these are all based on experiences from other cities and then just national planning standards, as well as what's appropriate in historic districts. Probably the most significant change related to signage, and this is actually quite a big change, is A-frame signs or sandwich board signs, whatever you'd like to call them, will no longer require a permit, is what is being proposed. It just didn't make sense. It was a long process and a lot of other just kind of complications with that section that just made it easier to fold those under as temporary signs. When we look at the building siting section, most of that was carried forward as the guidelines. I keep saying carried forward, but carried forward, made into standards, we should say. Some little tweaks to this section is we did change it to allow residential on the ground floor in certain areas. However, the first 40 feet of frontage at street intersections would not be allowed residential. So the goal is to preserve those corner nodes for commercial and retail uses and prevent residential from taking over corner areas. Not that that's going to happen or there's a market for that, but just to ensure that in the future. And then one thing that's probably new to you is instead of minimum street setbacks, we included maximum street setbacks. So this is basically saying, hey, I'm on a meeting. Sorry about that. There's a maximum street setbacks, so really just saying you have to build your buildings to the street property line with a little deviation allowed in there between 0 and 10 feet. For parking and site access, again, most of this remains kind of as the guidelines kind of intended. One change that was a little more significant was now adding in new off-street parking being prohibited in the side yard of any building. If you recall, the guidelines kind of allowed, or I should say guided on parking being allowed kind of on the side of building in like a courtyard area or in the middle of a block that would make a curb cut into the street. This would say something like that would not be allowed. It would have to be in the rear behind the building. And then also just being more clear on protections for residential districts and single-family uses as well. So, we had a lot of discussion about the parking issue, and it kind of was the parking situation, and it was kind of felt by most that this was appropriate for the downtown. Now, this doesn't say that existing parking areas that are in the side yard have to go away. They get grandfathered in just like everything else. And if they were to make significant changes, like redevelop the site, then it would have to be located in the rear yard. Massing and scale changes, as the guidelines kind of described today, it was really just a matter of assigning numbers and standards to that section. So nothing terribly different from the intent of the guidelines regarding things like height and facades and design of those massing and scale items. One thing that is expanded was the architectural materials section, which you probably noticed. Really two differentiations here. One is for buildings that are considered historic under the historic district application would have a certain list of permitted materials that are recommended or required, and then for everything else, it's really just stating what's prohibited. We don't care about any of the other materials other than what's on the prohibited material list. And this is really just, we don't know, there's so many different types of materials being developed every year, and trying to keep up with that is just too much work and really unnecessary. So instead, we identified the types of materials that we really would not prefer to see in downtown because of their perhaps low quality, design, aesthetic, or a combination of those sorts of things. There's also a section in here, and it was noted in your staff report, regarding demolitions. So this would require an application to be sent to the city for a demolition request to be reviewed by the DDRB. This is really for a number of reasons, but probably the most significant is if it is a historic, this is only for historic buildings, by the way, that are designated, but would give time to document that building for its historic nature, photos, documentation by the Historic Preservation Commission and others. So there are a lot of other cities that do get even more strict on demolition standards too. That come to mind are Dubuque, Iowa, and Sioux City, Iowa. Both Dubuque's probably the more prime example of how they require a lot of different things for a demolition approval. This is kind of a minimum effort, really, just to allow that time to work through the options of what the plan is for the site after demolition, and give time for documentation if it is a historic structure. So then outside of the design standard sections, you obviously saw in your packet a few other things. One was related to parklets, which is currently being operated under a pilot program. I'm sure Andrea can talk more about this if you have questions, but really just including some changes that make some updates to sidewalk seating permits, and then codifying specific parklet requirements within the code. So getting a little more detail, and that stems from the downtown action plan as well, as far as some of those recommendations. So the criteria for review are really not different from today, although there are objective standards and not guidelines for the DDRB and staff to kind of decide on So the Secretary of Interior standards are an important reference for historic buildings. Obviously, this code amendment, and then anything that's not covered in this code amendment, the other applicable sections of the zoning ordinance would apply. So if you don't see something listed in the design standards that you're like, wait, how do we regulate this? Like, I didn't see this in here. Well, that then reverts back to the B4 zoning district standards, and whatever those might be for that particular item. So with that was kind of a quick overview, trying to hit the highlights of some of the more significant changes that we talked through over the past year and a half or so with the DDRB. Happy to answer any questions. We'll stop my share here in case Andrea wanted to show anything, but happy to answer any questions and or comments.
Okay, Mr., now you were on this commission. How could you have a question? Mr. Budke, please.
I just wanted to start by thanking you, Andrea, and you, Charlie, and all the folks at RDG. I mean, this is like, just looking at the staff report, it's clear, or it should be to everybody, that this is like an immense amount of work that was undertaken. And so thank you for that and for sticking with it. I had a couple of kind of high level notes that I jotted down here. I think that, Andrew, you started by saying, like, kind of framing this around the DDRB, and I think that that's really useful, right? Like, we found that over time, the DDRB, which is like proved very useful, it has some shortcomings and it needs some reform. So I think the effect is really just to refocus the DDRB on probably what it was intended to do from the first place, right? Which is like new buildings, major renovations, facade updates, not a new roof membrane, a new window replacement.
I think immediately post-flood, if I can jump in, those even immediate, what we think are minor, probably were very large at that time.
Sure.
And so I think they served their purpose, the way it's set up served its purpose for its original intention. 20 years later, you're right, roof maintenance, roof repairs, those minor things aren't needed.
Yep. So I think that's the right direction. Also, I wanted to comment on the parklets. That's been operated as a pilot. I think it's been a wildly successful pilot, and I just want to point that out. Not every, restaurateur down here like takes advantage of that, but the ones that do, they have a lot of value in that. And I think it really adds a lot to the neighborhood and the street life in the afternoon and early evening. So another really good move. I think the point about the A-frame signage, I support this too. The idea that, like, if I want to advertise what the sandwich special is, like that there should be a permit for that is just it's just preposterous to me. So I think what you've done here is good because it establishes the expectations and eliminates the permitting requirement. So there's still, if you go outside the lines, somebody will come take your sign down. So I think that's right. And then the last couple things, in the staff report, you had a couple of kind of sort of dissenting feedback that came up, and one regarding the demolitions and one regarding, help me out here.
I think it was digital signage.
Yes. So I agree with the positions that you've taken here in this proposal. So with the signage, I know we're talking an awful lot about signage tonight, but with the digital signage, I just wouldn't support that, right? Like scrolling LED signs. I think we're right to keep that kind of off the list for now. But if somebody disagrees, they still have open, like, an appeal option. Is that correct?
Yes, there's always an appeal option to go through DDRB as well as City Council. if we get to a point where we feel like there's enough of those appeals coming forward and we would like to change code, it would be a code revision to allow it just outright, much like we're doing now.
Okay. And then as far as the demolitions, this commenter points out, if it's a historic building, nobody else in B4 has to go through basically this extra review. But I would push back on that. I'm okay with this process, right? I think when we're talking about these historic buildings, the public has already taken an interest in them. You see that with the Historic Register, the Department of Interior, and the Historic Preservation Commission. So, obviously that has to be balanced with private property rights. So I think that even though this introduces some subjectivity, I think there's a compelling reason for that.
I think it will be very dependent on how each case is handled and how the political bodies make their decisions on yay or nay for approving or denying an application. It will be very challenging to actually deny one on what we haven't defined any set bases, other than, if you don't agree with somebody's plan afterwards, for what they would plan to do with the property afterwards. And so the city attorney's take on that was, you can add these restrictions in, but it will be staff's work to kind of guide that facts and findings element through each individual case. Sure.
So just kind of like an example, not a real life example, but if somebody wanted to demolish a historic, a listed building, I feel like this requirement just basically puts the onus back on the developer to really come up with a tight plan and a clear proposal for everybody to evaluate. So if somebody were to tomorrow say, we want to knock down the St. John's block, I think the community would have a problem with that. So I agree with this. So that was all the comments I had. If I can, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay. Got a motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Kuhn places a second on it. Any further discussion? Mr. Matichak, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. Number 7, exemptions, that will be in effect for every resident that's in there, and also the fact that if it burns down, they will be allowed to rebuild on the footprint?
Correct.
Okay.
We specifically put that in there, specifically with the damage and rebuilding aspect. We know in the recent months, with this even recent legislature, we've had some issues and concerns about non-conformings and the process to handle those. We have absolutely no intention of trying to create non-conformings with this zoning change, and we do recognize we have a handful, probably less than a dozen, residential structures that probably don't meet this design standard aspect that we're going to, and we absolutely do not want to deter somebody from refinancing their home, selling it to a new person. Those are viable housing units. We want to make sure they're able to continue, so that clause was a necessity.
So this won't affect them if they want to sell to somebody else?
No, it will not. The only time it will come into effect is if they want to do a building addition.
Right, I understand that. You got that printed on here.
And I should also point out, it was a true team lift. Stephanie helped with the parklet code aspect of it, so I have to thank her for her efforts on that. So.
No further discussion. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That's preliminary, right?
I will add one final thing, that it is a lot to absorb. If you do have questions in the next month or prior to final, please reach out and let me know.
Actually, I do have a question. In this format, it's pretty dense. There was a graphical version
Yes.
that we were able to use.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Staff selfishly focused on the code to make sure that was correct for this formal approval process. There is a colorful manual, more easily public consumptionable easily digestible. Still a lot of material, because it definitely is a lot, but there is an easier to use public piece. That's not a code element that we can put into, so it will match what is in the code, and it'll be attached for final.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Charlie, thanks as well. You can head off now if you want.
Yep, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I'm not kicking you off, but.
But you did.
Yeah. I think he took advantage of that. Thank you. I have a couple reports that we'll talk about real quick. So the rezoning discussion for properties along University Avenue. I just wanted to share with you, this was going to, it came close to being an item on tonight's agenda. There was a University Avenue corridor study that was done, and we'll send you out a link in the coming days to it, but there was a particular centerline zoning. There was one recommendation that was made. It was it was referred to as centerline zoning rezoning along University Avenue, and it's the University Avenue corridor study that was done from downtown out to UND. Andrew, you're probably a little bit more familiar with it than most, but we'll get you a link to it. But one recommendation was to rezone, the thought was to have B4 not be split along University Avenue. So as we go along University Avenue here, you see it's commercial on the south side, I'll call it south side, but there was also a thought to stretch up into the north side as well, so there wasn't this center line zoning where you had residential on one side and commercial on the other, since both those sides of the streets are going to feel the same. The problem kind of became, and I'll show you, we had one request.
Love to see it.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, Megan. So hopefully you see that now, Megan, so you can see what everybody else was looking at. So here's City Hall here. It's at 255 North 4th Street, and just north of City Hall along North 4th Street, there's a particular property along here that we received a request that just happened to be at the same time this study was complete. This property is within an R4. It doesn't look very much like an R4, which is multifamily. And it's very much an office space, which is allowed within our R4, but it very narrowly focuses the uses that are likely to go in that property. And so when I looked at taking this rezoning that really looked essentially from downtown out to, I'll say roughly the railroad, where we would look at doing the center line zoning, I really was going to focus on the 3rd Street to 5th Street side and kind of looking at the areas that would make sense. So the city has a parking lot here that could certainly be B4. It's probably could potentially be a redevelopment site at some point in the future. Although right now City Hall folks are parking in there. There's some residents that are up here next to Kelly's Bar that are along North 3rd Street, and we do have a couple parcels here that could potentially be redevelopment sites, but I always got to be careful when I start talking about redevelopment sites, because currently some of those are people's homes, and they don't always take kindly to people talking about their places being redevelopment sites as well. So Greg Schneider owns a piece here that's a parking lot and a garage, and I don't know if he necessarily has a problem with people calling his place redevelopment site, but the focus again was on this parcel here. There was an interest in a property, a use for that property that was for a tattoo parlor. That's not allowed within the R4 currently. It would be allowed within the B4, and so what I did is I took a look at that property and then the two next to it and said, hey, can we just expand this B4 to include these 3 properties and maybe even the City Hall parking lot. And I spoke to the owner of these 2 properties, and he really was not interested. rezoning his property. He wasn't sure he was interested in a tattoo parlor going next to him either. He wasn't sure that that was a use that would be in his best interest currently, because he's not looking to redevelop either right now. So I look at this, and we could do a micro PUD with that. That's a very small piece, and that might be tough for a lot of people to even see on a map if we went that route. Or we could include it in with our parking lot and make this B4 as well. So just some options that we were looking at, but I knew we didn't really have a good answer for you even as staff, so that's kind of why we pulled it from the agenda and wanted to have a discussion. I think our next steps was for me to kind of present to you, get your thoughts on it, and then at the same time send the study out to everybody. It's a very large document, but I'll actually send you there's about 2 pages that are really the focus on this recommendation. You can kind of see what was thought there. So with the whole map for the whole area, but that's kind of where we're stuck with, is a property here that really just does not fit the R4. And I'm actually going to do something I probably shouldn't, but I'll go to Google Maps. So you can see, I'll pull up what that property looks like, because I think that'll do a little bit better job of showing you the reason I'm kind of in a quandary with what to do with the property. And the answer could be just, no, it doesn't fit, but we at least wanted to take a look and find out if everybody thought that there were some options here. So here's the property. It's located, like I said, there's 2 rentals on this side. Oh, crap. Not impressed.
My AV guy isn't happy. And we don't have our lawyer here today.
Yeah. So again, now Megan and everybody else apologize for that, but here's the property. It's a 1-story flat roof type property. It's been a very good office space, I think, and the last owner actually did a lot of improvements to the interior and painted up the outside. It looks pretty good. It was owned by John French, I think, for many years. And then these 2 rentals next to it, and then you're really into the B4 as you get into the cleaning business over here on the corner right across from City Hall. So this one, it's, one of those things is not like the other. This is that property that just doesn't fit. And so it could work potentially as a tattoo parlor, but the owner of these 2 properties, he wasn't real sure that he liked the thought of that. I don't know if I necessarily have heartburn with that, and probably would have come with a recommendation to expand the B4 for that, but I really wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that, on what, and maybe we don't have an answer, but something to think about for next time, and if nobody has anything to discuss on it. So,
Mr. Budke?
I mean, so the B4 the updates that we were just talking about, I mean, there's a specific provision in there about non-conforming, right? To basically try and diffuse this very problem, right? If there's an existing, say, single-family detached home or, bungalow style structure, that there's no problem with that in the B4, if I'm understanding it correctly.
yeah, correct. But this is not in the B4 currently.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And we had the problem with the owner next door not wanting it to go B4.
Sure.
So that was where it didn't go, it didn't escape our thoughts that if we had this rezoning come at the same time, that we would put this before when we had that discussion, and I think July 1, go ahead.
Yeah, so the way the B4 exemption is written is everything that's there current as of July 1 of this year would be able to meet under those exemptions and continue to exist. Anything rezoned and added in would become non-conforming. And so knowing that the property owner wasn't in favor, we don't typically like to force rezonings. So at least it hasn't been current practice since I've worked here. So it was a discussion of, we should probably visit with the commission of how this should go. Because just that timing, we can adjust that exemption date in the previous item if we think this is something necessary, but the way it's currently written, it wouldn't.
Sure. That all makes sense to me. It's just that in my mind, like if the primary objection is like, hey, don't change the zoning on this property because then it's going to be non-conforming. Well, like assuming what we just were talking about 4-2, like that's not an issue in this
I don't
case.
know that I heard that from, I guess, the property owner. I didn't speak with him directly, but my inference was the property owner.
He was good.
More of a neighborhood feel than a B4 feel.
Yeah,
I mean, he has the residential, this commercial structure is what's odd. But if you look at the rest of this row of blocks and even beyond that, you are into a traditional traditional neighborhood.
Right.
And
Right.
So
how do you penalize the homeowners or the owners around it
Yeah.
for having something that somebody let go, again, a long time ago?
Yeah, and the center line zoning piece really didn't.
Somebody else has let that go a long time ago, and here we are. Mr. Matichek?
That was originally built by the Red Cross.
Sure.
That's who was there.
Makes sense. So under an R4, can it just be a small office? Can it be?
Yep, it can currently, yeah. There's
Then-
some allowances for 20 person or less off.
Then my vote would be, or my say would be, then leave it what fits into that neighborhood, then you don't have mad people who own the property around it. To put something new into it that doesn't fit isn't fair to the people that own around it. Because they bought it then knowing it was Red Cross or a small office. I just think you got to keep with what fits. Don't change the zoning around. We're going to be in the same
Yeah,
heap again.
There are other options, like I said, micro PUD. We wouldn't preclude somebody else from coming forward, but I'm not too sure this one was ripe for, at least, when I thought about the centerline zoning and bringing all that in. But there are other options as well, too, for the tattoo parlor place that we probably just need to try to recruit some other spots for them and try to work with them on some other available spots.
I would agree. Just got to look out for the property owners too around it. Okay, that's it on that.
We'll still send out that study. I think it'd be good for everybody to at least be able to have a look at that, so. 5.2 is our land use plan update presentation. So with that, we've met, I think, our second time yesterday with our land use task force. They're representing planning and zoning is Steve, Jamie, and Alex. So thank you for you guys taking your time, meeting with us. They're about 2-hour blocks is what they've been so far. Like I said, second one yesterday. I want to introduce Scott Harmstead with SRF. He's been the one that was hired. This is kind of the cooperation with the MPO, but Scott's put in a lot of time, and he's got a short presentation to kind of let you know where we're at and where we're headed to. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Scott Harmstead. I work for SRF Consulting. I'm actually out of Bismarck. Presentation.
Probably show you.
Yeah. Go.
I'll pull this up and I'll actually share it for you because I heard that there's an issue with people remembering to share.
Thanks. Just flip through it, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is just a check-in. We're really towards the beginning of this work. We started in February, March. The first land use subcommittee meeting or task force meeting was in March. The consultant team again is SRF Consulting, but also Praxis. Mark's still with Praxis. We wanted to partner with him. He just knows this community so well. He knows a lot of the stakeholders so well. Provides a great insight. So he's a great addition to our team. And then the project management team is basically MPO and then some staff from city planning, and then myself. Specifically, Stephanie and Ryan on staff. So just an overview of this, if you, it's been 5 years, so if you're newer to the commission, it works a lot like a comprehensive plan does in other communities, but specifically it's one component of the comprehensive plan, and that's specified in Article 8 of your code. But it's intended to guide the physical, social, economic development, basically a wide range of things. So it's not just land use. We're looking at a number of other things that relate to land use or impact land use. And it's community-wide, and it's really everywhere within the city's zoning influence. So it's not even just within the city limits, but it's also within your extraterritorial area. So huge impacts, a really important document. It's a 25-year vision. A lot of that is it's connected to the MPO's need for a future land use, what they call the MTP or Metropolitan Transportation Plan that they also update. So the MPO uses the land use designations and the land use mapping from this to inform their transportation planning process. So I know that the city only exercises the 2-mile area around the extraterritorial area, but you could, this plan could potentially look at up to 4 miles according to the state law. It doesn't mean you have to exercise the 4 miles, but you can look at 4 miles. So the current plan, it has a 2045 horizon. It has 11 goals. It's just a quick overview of what you currently have. It looks at a pretty moderate growth rate of 1.2%. And there's a population listed there of what's projected. And then the idea is, it's really, the 45 plan really keys on updating the growth tiers primarily. Obviously, there's a lot of direction already, as was discussed earlier about downtown. I think the 2045 plan really focuses more so on the edges, the areas outside of downtown primarily. So what's included in this? This is just a list of a number of the things we'll be looking at. The items in yellow there, we're doing something I'm pretty excited about. We have focus groups, and I think some of you, at least Commissioner Butke is on one of those. So those focus areas are around housing, assets and amenities. What's that? That's like unique assets the community has. UND, park system, schools, things like that. Economic development, infrastructure. Infrastructure also includes transportation, so it's your wet infrastructure, but it's also your transportation system. So we'll be starting those towards the end of this month, and then we'll have 2 rounds of those focus group meetings. This is just a very high-level look at the whole process. So we just finished a city profile update, and it's good bedtime reading if you want to fall asleep. But we have a project website. I'll show it at the end, but you can go to the project website, and that's on there, the city profile update. Really, it just provides more recent population trends, which will actually be updated pretty soon with the new census information coming out in the coming months. Looking forward to that, but also other information related to the economy, related to housing, demographics, different things. Really right now we're moving into this strategies for growing smart. That's where we're starting the focus group discussions, and we're getting into a public workshop, which will be next Tuesday here in this building, in this room. This is hard to see, I'm sorry. So this is just a more detailed schedule. Really, this is about a little over a year-long process to go through all this. A lot of that's because all the public involvement we have been asked to go through. So we're looking to wrap things up in March of 2022. And if you're familiar with MPO projects, they're sticklers about getting these projects done on time. So that's very likely that will be done by 2022 or March 2022. I like this slide because it's just a very high level overview of what we're doing. Right now we're really in this very high level, if you think about a funnel, the goals and opportunities, the kind of the vision of what your future land use, what you want it to be. That's where we're at now. As we get more down that funnel, we're going to be looking at alternatives, and specifically land use alternatives. not just the fringe, but also infill opportunities, redevelopment opportunities as well, as much as possible. And then the last phase is, of course, the draft document. And this outlines all of the public input opportunities, workshops, and focus groups, and also hearings and stuff at the end. So I just wanted to touch briefly on what we're seeing in terms of the some of the existing issues. So population change from in the last 10 years has been quite steady. So, you know, the city's continuing to grow. Again, we're going to find out here pretty soon what the census numbers are for the city. This is a little interesting. This talks about percent population by age group within the last 10 years. So it's broken out into five-year age cohorts, basically. What's interesting about this is that you know, you can see what type of age groups the community is starting to shift towards in terms of more prominence. So a lot of it is primarily, look at this, what sticks out to me is a lot of the growth in families. That's a lot of great news for the future of the community. I guess one of the challenges is keeping those people here, right? So if they leave, they come back, or at least they stay. And then, of course, the trend throughout the rest of the country is there's an increase in the more retirement age, you know, baby boomer population as well. Oh, and the increase in families is also reflected towards the beginning of this, right? And under 5 years, and 5 to 9 years, and 10 to 14. So that has a big impact on planning, right? So, for example, making sure we have the right type of, do we have enough land use accommodation for families that works for families, as an example. Economy, not a surprise, but just regionally, overall, there's been a trend upward. This shows a more recent trend downward a little bit, but going back, 15 years, there's been a general trend upward. I like this one as a land use planner. This talks about acreage change in different land use types in the last 5 years. So in green shows an increase, in yellow shows a decrease. So in residential, there's been a significant increase, over 300 acres. Industrial as well, and then public uses as well. The decreases have, of course, been in vacant land where you have some of this development, but also, of course, agricultural land on the fringe. So it really puts that it puts that picture in numbers. And just really what we're at now, and what you have in the 2045 plan is this really, I don't know if I should say complex, but really involved structure of goals, objectives, policy actions, and strategic actions. I'm not sure why there has to be, and we discussed this with the subcommittee, why there has to be two levels of policy action, or policy actions and strategic actions. So one of the thrusts here is to try to simplify this. So why do there need to be 4 layers of policy language? It's really confusing, hard to implement, not very practical. One of our main goals here is to simplify this tremendously. Also, if you look at some of these individual objectives, policy actions, and so on, some of them are very wordy, and really we want to simplify that to make it easier for you to use, staff to use, anybody. So this is just an overview of, we looked at the existing goals, there's 11 of them, and we tried to distill themes that could be attached to each of them. And in the blue, we've noted some of the comment we've already received in terms of changes requested by the land use subcommittee. So some of the themes: growth management, residential development, mixed use, commercial development, and I won't go through these in too much detail unless you have any questions. We can certainly talk about it, but some of the other ones: industrial development, urban design and land use planning, parks and open space. With urban design and land use planning, there was some discussion about that yesterday in our committee meeting, and the question was, is this achieved? There has been some progress there. There's been progress downtown. There's been progress with some of your corridor overlay design standards, or design standards. So the idea too is, well, can this type of information be wrapped into the other categories like industrial development, commercial, residential, whatnot? And then the rounding it out here, transportation, natural resources, sustainable development. One of the things on sustainable development is the comment was, well, that's not just environmental related. It should also look at fiscal sustainability. And then planning processes. How can we simplify, generally speaking, how can we simplify our processes, which we heard a lot about that earlier downtown, which is great. That's already starting to happen. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how comprehensive this is, how wide-ranging, and it's really meant to be a guide for you in your decision-making and for the council. So we'll come back to the Q&A, but just to round off my spiel here, some of the outreach tools we have, there's the website. It's gf2050plan.com, pretty easy to look up. We will, as we going forward, we will start to do email updates. We will having social media outreach starting tomorrow. Traditional media, of course, a press release, and then we have a stakeholder coordination, so not just the land use subcommittee, but a lot of those focus group members we're going to lean on to help spread the word as well. And some things you could do right now, we're having a community survey that's coming out tomorrow. We encourage you to take that and also encourage you to spread that. Send that to anybody you have on your contact list to get that out. We're hoping for good feedback on that, a lot of feedback. And then there's the workshop next Tuesday, but we'll also have another one late in the summer as well. Yep, so same thing here, but any questions you have at this point? Again, we're pretty early in the process.
Mr. Manichek.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a comment. For my satisfaction with this particular study is that forget the 4-mile ET. City's tried it before, it doesn't work. You have 3 tiers right now in the 2-mile ET area. Either work with those or redo them. But you get to expand your ET each time something gets annexed, it goes further out. But I think you're really looking for a lot of headaches if you want to go 4-mile ET. Okay. Personal opinion. Thank you.
Great. No, appreciate that feedback, especially at this point, because our next phase is getting into that type of discussion. So, thanks. And I will say that some of the input we've already had on that issue is to do what you're saying, is to avoid, at least for the most part, the 4-mile. I do have some last parting words. This is a significant investment, and it's not just one part of your city, it's the entire city, the entire area with planning zoning jurisdiction. So, we can do the best plan in the world, but it's going to be worthless without implementation. So really stress that your staff follows up on it, stress that, and then you guys are responsible a lot for this too. So it's not just pretty pictures and a consultant. I hate leaving a project and not seeing it implemented. So that's probably the biggest takeaway that I can leave with you, is just focus on making this worth your while, and the taxpayers worthwhile. So thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll just hit on a little bit, maybe to tie a bow onto that. The downtown action plan that we did, that really focused on the downtown, right? The item that you had before you tonight, which was the standards, that was really a kind of a follow-on to that some of the implementation stuff that we wanted took time, but so part of that is, making sure that we keep up with those things too. So it's kind of that, put the onus on us, and we'll follow through, and we certainly know that we get questions along the way. Where are we at with this? So that's all good. So don't feel like you're putting extra pressure on us. So we'll keep following through with that. But that was just the land use plan. That's kind of next phase. Like he said, we're going to be focusing Downtown's already been dealt with that downtown action plan, so we have our, kind of our marching orders there. We're looking at the other pieces, so that's where we'll get at with that. So exciting stuff for the planners, but we hope you guys are as well. So with that, that's it from staff tonight.
All right. I will close this thing out. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by... Second by Mr. Kuhn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Oh, I guess that...